Hey, today we're going to talk about a very specific type of wetlands, which is a Blackwater River, obviously meeting the criteria for a wetlands. But we'll first talk about its associated vegetation, such as duckweed. Duckweed is an obligate hydric species, meaning it has to be by water. Cypress trees, though, are also a wetland species, and along with the epiphytic growths that are on them, the things that use the trees to get up in the sunlight. Eel and tape grass found on the bottom. Jack in the pulpit, a bank species commonly found in wetlands habitat. Duck potato found floating on the surface. And then pennygrass, a species commonly found on the banks. When we talk about this particular thing, we're talking about a vegetation profile. And let's use an example. We were lucky enough to be able to get into a cypress dome when it was dry, so you could actually see the watermarks and the trees and the particular vegetation. In this case, you can see where the water stops based on the changes in the color of the trunk. There tends to be a place where it's dominant. We see that it's very clear on the ground. There's not a lot of vegetation on the ground. There are some ferns, leather fern, but the idea is most of what we see are the trees, sweet gum, cypress. We also have to look at the soil. Wetland soil, river soil even, would basically lack those horizons we commonly associate with oxygen. We talk about anaerobic soil profiles. Obviously, too, of course, a river would have water, and that is a wetlands indicator, the presence of water near at the surface. But remember, a critical point is that the wetlands of the river extends beyond the banks. We just have to have the water at the surface or near the surface to be a wetlands habitat. So we look at, number one, what it looks like, but also the plant types, which we indicated earlier, the particular species that are there. In this case, you can see dollarweed or pennywort and some small sedges, and actually a duck potato emerges from the background, and some pickleweed, and these things become indicators that this is a particular wetlands habitat. The soil is there. So we have plants, soil, and water all making up this idea of how we define a wetlands habitat, especially in river habitats. Like I said, these are the things we want to look at. How do we know where water is at in these systems? Well, we use biological markers for that. We use those things that indicate it, and we'll go back to the idea that we can clearly see the water level here because of the root base. We see the water coming up and the roots spreading out basically right where the water's edge would be. So we can look at that. But even clearer in these particular cases are looking at the watermarks on the trees. In this case, you can see that they're fairly high up. So what does it all look like? Let's take a look at the Hillsborough River. When we're looking at the Hillsborough River, we can see the fact that, we have the down trees, we have sweet gum, we have cypress trees. Obviously, the presence or absence of water. We don't need to actually look at the soil because water is covering it. And this is the Hillsborough River at a fairly high level after some recent rains, and some trees have fallen down. Species like this, they take advantage of it. In this case, when the organic material goes into the water, it allows fish to move up into that particular area and feed in places they don't normally have access to. And after we do that, we can also see the fact that we have alligators in this area and some fish moving at the surface. But like I said, very typical aquatic profile or vegetation profile for a river. Here we have an alligator sitting up in the log sunning, taking advantage of these places that show up. And this one's actually fairly permanent. You can see it's been scoured down by the water at the time. So like I said, these are things we see associated with it. It's interesting. You can look at this clip and hear the warblers in the background, a species that's migrating through at the time. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Blackwater River systems and introduction to wetlands with the particular example of these systems that are here. The idea, of course, is that you can look at a river and see all the qualifications for a wetland, the vegetation, the presence of water in the system, obviously. And then, of course, when we look at the banks, you see that very typical anaerobic soil profile. And in the process, you've learned just one of the many examples Florida offers of wetlands habitats.